All right, so today I'm excited to talk with Dr. Sherry Stridehorst, who I've had a long history with. Actually, we were grad students together. Sherry was my first boss here at Alberta Pulse Growers. But we're talking about something that Sherry is very passionate about, and I am learning just the significance and importance of this, and that is pre-harvest interval. So, Sherry, can we just dive right in? And what is pre-harvest interval?
Absolutely. So the pre-harvest interval is the minimum amount of time between when a pesticide is applied and when the crop is swathed or harvested. Now, this pre-harvest interval is important for growers because it helps tell the grower um, the amount of time they need to allow so that pesticide residues in a crop that was treated or sprayed, so that those residues are at a minimum level so that they are not going to cause human health issues. Now, we really, of course, want to make sure all of our food products are safe, and that means farmers are using their products and their pesticides according to label directions. And I just want to mention for my non-farmer friends out there that this is an incredibly tiny amount of pesticide that is very years ago, we might not have even been able to detect this because our measurement levels are getting better. And these are international, scientifically assessed residue levels. So I just want to, put down any panic level if anyone hears pesticide residues in their food. But when we go back to the grower perspective, it's really important for growers that they be aware of when they spray their herbicides, fungicides, or insecticides later in the growing season. Now, your pre-harvest interval is based on making sure that the farmer's using the label rate, the number, and the application, and the correct application growth stage for these pesticides. And farmers can find this information on pesticide labels, the Keep It Clean website, or even the Blue Book in Alberta has this kind of information. Now, if pesticides are applied at the wrong growth stage, and here I'm specifically thinking about glyphosate or any other product, though, that can mean that that residue and that pesticide is unable to metabolize in the plant, and then there's residues left in the harvested grain. So we'll talk more about this, but the pre-harvest interval does vary with the product. So the pesticide you're using, your crop type. For example, I found it really interesting as I was digging into this that soybeans and field pea can actually have a different pre-harvest interval for use of the same product. So really important for people to be mindful of. And the pesticide formulation, if you are using Lance WDG versus Lance AG, they do have different pre-harvest intervals. So it's really important to do your homework on this. And it's particularly important if you have to even start thinking about this into late June or early July, because there are products with a 30-day pre-harvest interval. Field pea is a crop that is harvested early, can be harvested early in August. So this needs to be something on people's radar, late June, early July kind of timelines.
Here, that's especially important because we're even anticipating. I was just out checking fields yesterday, and we could be harvesting wheat in August this year. Things are just advancing so quickly. Okay, so you kind of alluded to the fact that this is on like crop protection products. So we're dealing with weeds, we're dealing with diseases, we're potentially dealing with bugs. Can you just give us some examples of like
Yeah,
what are the products, or is it
absolutely.
everything?
So it is everything, but I think the ones that are most relevant are we're going to talk about fungicides, insecticides, and pre-harvest herbicide harvest aids.
Okay.
So if we start with fungicides, because I think that's kind of the one that's most timely in that late June, early July product. So let's say you are planning to use a Delero 325 prothioconazole, which is a group 3 triazole plus a trifloxystrobin in which is a group 11, and you're trying to use this to control Microspirella blight on your field pea. And this product has a 30-day pre-harvest interval. So if we go through a calendar scenario, this means if you are swathing that crop on or harvesting that crop on August 15th, you cannot spray that product after July 16th.
Okay, can I
So
just
it's
stop you
kind
for a
of
sec?
tricky.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because if we end up with a bit of a like hot dry spell, crops can advance really quickly.
Exactly. So this is tough. So
Yeah.
you're using your crystal ball to
Uh-huh.
look forward into the future and then predict when harvesting or swathing will be.
All right.
So, especially as you mentioned, Jen, 2023, a hot, dry year, crops are advancing more rapidly than normal. You might actually need to select a different fungicide based on the pre-harvest interval and that time from fungicide application until swathing or harvest. So let's say we initially thought we were going to use Delero 325 with its 30-day pre-harvest interval, and then we're going, that's panicking me. Look at an alternative like Lance WDG. So that's a group 7 fungicide. It has a 21-day pre-harvest interval on dry pea to control. So you're still controlling your Microspirella blight
Mhm.
on field pea, but by switching to Lance from the Delero, you go from that you cannot spray from it was July 16th. We're now going to July 25th. So we're gaining an extra 9 days. So, there's trade-offs.
Yeah.
Lance is a one active group, whereas your Delero was two actives, but it's everyone has to look at these scenarios
Mhm.
on their own farm. Another little flag I want to just mention is that Lance WDG and Lance AG are different products with different PHIs because Lance AG is Lance WDG plus Headline. And since Headline has a 30-day pre-harvest interval, you have to use the pre-harvest interval of the tank mix product or the pre-active or the pre-mixed product with the longest PHI. So just to be mindful and really carefully read labels. So
Okay.
as we've mentioned, this is an early harvest. It's anticipated. So I think it's best to err on the side of caution with a product that has a shorter pre-harvest interval. The other thing is, if you end up spraying, I don't want people to panic because there are options. If you get caught with a longer PHI, let's say you did spray that Delero on your peas on July 16th, and you're in a situation where your crop's advancing more quickly, harvest will simply need to be delayed. So if your pea crop to harvest on August 10th, you just have to wait till the 15th. And I know that's, really challenging for farmers, but think of the alternative where you would be harvesting a crop where there could be detectable pesticide residues in your harvested grain and then the liabilities that come to you if that's detected. So not a place you want to go.
It's an we can manage this problem. It's almost you need to like take your calendar and say, okay, on this date, moving forward,
Yep.
I can harvest because it's not top of mind. It's not something we think about, right? We
No,
look at rain
it
fast. We
isn't.
look at how many days between applications, but
Yeah, we're looking disease triangle and we kind
yeah.
of, I think in field pea, especially in my area, kind of in north central Alberta, it's that August long weekend where the Ascochyta just brings down those field pea crops. But you can't be spraying after the August long weekend because you're getting into too much pre-harvest interval territory. So it's really good to be top of mind on this.
And um, now, who's checking for this? I mean, obviously, it kind of feels like Big Brother is going to be watching over our shoulder, and they're not there. So, this is very much a personal responsibility, but there could be consequences down the line. Can you just touch on some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So compliance with pre-harvest intervals is a legal requirement. And again, it's kind of a little bit of that good faith
Yeah.
to ensure that pesticide residues do not exceed those MRLs. And these MRLs are established by the Food and Drug Act. Under the Food and Drug Act, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, so CFIA, for those of you who are familiar with that lingo, they are responsible for monitoring and enforcing to prevent and make sure that safe food is being sold. So there is checking for residues. And I think one of the things that is probably most checked is glyphosate residues. And we didn't talk about glyphosate, but maybe we should go back and talk about so everyone's super clear on the
Yes.
PHI for glyphosate. But if CFIA were to find that your pulse crop had residues which exceed the MRLs, this is a violation of that Food and Drug Act. And in these situations, your grain could be seized, destroyed, or forbidden for export. And, I just don't think we are a country that depends on exporting. And we are, have this reputation for safe food production, and we want to do everything to maintain that reputation. And we don't want that financial risk and loss for the grower. So it's important to be educated on these things.
Well, and then further to that, if at the acceptance end, on the market end, if they test, we've seen doors closed to other countries, not just at Canada, but so really it is an industry that is risk.
Absolutely. And I don't think anyone wants to, be the one who damaged the relationship with pulse trade to India. That's not a feather you want in your hat.
Not at all. All right, so we kind of just did a really high level quick dive. If somebody wants more information about pre-harvest intervals, there will be some information on our app and an article in Post Crop News coming. But if somebody really is curious, where are some really good resources? Blue Book, product labels, is that really the best place to kind of go digging?
Yeah, absolutely. So, on the Keep It Clean website, they have a really cool calculator where you kind of pick your crop, you pick the product, and it tells you, when what that pre-harvest interval can be, or actually is, I should say. I always defer to product labels. I go online, I read it, it's usually towards the end of the document. Sometimes it's hidden in there, sometimes it's in a table, but that is the ultimate source, because that is what is approved by the Food and Drugs Act, is those pre-harvest intervals in that label. So I always like going to the primary source. But the Blue Book has that information for a quick look. If you question it, just double check with the label.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Sherry.
You're welcome, Jen. No, this has been great tonight. I'm just going to put one quick plug in. The pre-harvest interval for glyphosate is 7 days. So don't spray glyphosate and harvest 3 days later. 7 days. So that's my signing off message.
Less than 30%, right? 30%?
Less than 30.
Yeah.
See, moisture content is when you can start spraying. So just to do the back calculations.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jen.